centuries, and this book was prepared by the Kansas Teachers Organization to review the history of education in America during that time. The book confirms that, in its words, education was nurtured in the lap of the church, but that as the nation grew and the number of inhabitants in America increased, the church voluntarily relinquished control of elementary education to the state. Yet the philosophy of education did not change. In fact, the state superintendent of public instruction even declared,
if the study of the Bible is to be excluded from all state schools, if the inculcation of the principles of Christianity is to have no place in the daily program, if the worship of God is to form no part of the general exercises of these public elementary schools, then the good of the state would be better served by restoring all schools to church control.
State public education leaders believed that if public education ever reached the point that it did not inculcate religion, morality, and knowledge, that it did not teach the Bible in schools, did not inculcate the principles of Christianity, and did not incorporate the daily worship of God, then the country would be better off if the state gave all of its schools back to the church. So closely was religious faith embraced as a part of a sound public education, even on the university level, that in 1860, 262 out of 288 college presidents were ministers of the gospel, as were more than a third of all university faculty members. And in 1890, James Angell, president of the University of Vermont and the University of Michigan, reported that over 90% of the state universities that he surveyed conducted chapel services. At half of the state universities, chapel attendance was compulsory, and a quarter of the state universities required regular church attendance in addition to chapel attendance. This was the practice of state universities, simply continuing the philosophy of education that had caused America to become the most successful and prosperous nation in the history of the world. Interestingly, many of America's early educational leaders had also been patriots who had fought for the establishment of America as an independent nation during the Revolutionary War. They understood that if America was to endure beyond the American Revolution, then the principles on which America had been birthed, nurtured, and developed must be successfully transmitted to future generations. It was for this reason that so many of those early patriots became directly involved in writing educational plans, authoring textbooks, or starting universities. One of those early educational leaders was Dr. Benjamin Rush, a signer of the Declaration of Independence who also served in 3 presidential administrations. Dr. Rush had helped found 5 colleges, 3 of which still exist today. He was also a university professor, authored numerous textbooks, and was possibly the first founding father following the ratification of the Constitution to propose nationwide public schools, for which he may be titled the Father of Public Schools under the Constitution. In one of his famous educational policy papers, A Defense of the Use of the Bible as a School Book, Dr. Rush set forth nearly a dozen reasons why the Bible should always remain the principal textbook in American education. He closed that piece with a succinct warning on what would happen in America if the Bible were removed from schools.
In contemplating the political institutions of the United States, I lament that if we remove the Bible from schools, we waste so much time and money in punishing crimes and take so little pains to prevent them. For this divine book, above all others, favors that equality among mankind, that respect for just laws, and those sober and frugal virtues which constitute the soul of our government.
Since the Bible dealt with the heart, the source of all crime, Dr. Rush saw the Bible as the only sure means to prevent crime. He therefore predicted that if we ceased to teach the Bible in schools, then America would expend great quantities of time and money in punishing crime. Another famous leader with clear views on education was Gouverneur Morris. Gouverneur Morris was a signer of the Constitution and was the most active member of the Constitutional Convention. In fact, he was chosen by his peers at the convention to take their rough ideas and create the polished language that would form the Constitution. Gouverneur Morris literally produced the actual wording of that document and is therefore titled the penman of the Constitution. 2 years after he had helped create America's government, Morris penned 2 works to help the French in the creation of their new government. Morse outlined for the French the principles that we had utilized in our own successful system and encouraged them to implement the same. Notice his recommendation on education.
Religion is the only solid basis of good morals. Therefore, education should teach the precepts of religion and the duties of man towards God.
The penman of our Constitution believed that it was appropriate for schools to teach religion. Another important early leader with strong views on education was Fisher Ames. Ames helped frame the Bill of Rights in the very first federal Congress. In fact, he proposed the final wording for the First Amendment that was passed by the House. This book contains the writings of Fisher Ames, including his article entitled School Books. In that piece, Ames commented on a growing trend he had observed in American education.
It has been the custom of late years to put a number of little books into the hands of children containing fables and moral lessons. This is very well because it is right first to raise curiosity and then to guide it. Many books for children are, however, injudiciously compiled.
Ames then pointed out a dangerous unintended consequence from placing more books in the hands of children. He explained that each time a new book was added to the classroom, time was spent on that new book. The growing time spent on the many new books could eventually reduce the time students spent on the Bible. To this possibility, Fisher Ames strongly objected.
Why then, if these books for children must be retained, as they will be, should not the Bible regain the place it once held as a school book? Its morals are pure, its examples captivating and noble. The reverence for the sacred book that is thus early impressed lasts long, and probably, if not impressed in infancy, never takes firm hold of the mind.
Fisher Ames, a primary author of the First Amendment, warned that the Bible must never be pushed to the back of the classroom, much less completely out of schools. A number of other early statesmen and educators agreed. John Quincy Adams, a U.S. president and a university professor at Harvard, had similarly declared,
"To a man of liberal education, with regard to the history contained in the Bible, it is not so much praiseworthy to be acquainted with it as it is shameful to be ignorant of it."
And founding father Henry Lawrence, a president of Congress, echoed,
"The Bible is a necessary part of a polite education."
And Dr. Benjamin Rush had announced,
The Bible should be read in our schools in preference to all other books.
Today, however, the Bible has been pushed not just to the back of the classroom, it's been pushed completely out of the classroom, supposedly in the name and by the authority of the same early leaders who worked so hard to put the Bible in the classroom and to keep it there. Noah Webster was another famous American with a significant impact on education. He was a soldier during the American Revolution, a legislator, a judge, and was responsible for part of the language in the Constitution. As an educator, Webster helped found Amherst College, and he authored scores of textbooks on a number of different subjects, including the famous dictionary that bears his name. His impact on education was so profound that he's been titled the Schoolmaster to America. The first textbook penned by Webster was his famous Speller. Introduced in 1783, it became the spelling book for American schools for the next 150 years. In later years, that speller was popularly known as Webster's Blueback Speller because of the distinctive color of its cover. In Webster's early texts, every page, including the cover page and the flyleaf, was filled with useful information. And what did Webster print on those pages that today are usually blank? You see here Webster's 1839 speller, and on the inside of this book's cover, he used Bible verses. In this case, the lengthy passage from Ecclesiastes 12, beginning with,
"Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, where the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them."
Yet it was no surprise that Noah Webster should have placed the Scriptures in his text, for his philosophy of education was clear.
The Christian religion is the most important, and one of the first things in which all children under a free government ought to be instructed. No truth is more evident to my mind than that the Christian religion must be the basis of any government intended to secure the rights and privileges of a free people.
Webster's school texts therefore not only included rigorous academic exercises, but they also contained moral and religious lessons. And Webster did not hesitate to acknowledge the important role that Christianity had played in the establishment of America as the